Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news and Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today we're starting off showing off the video game news instead of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel because I wanted to show off some progress I made as part of the accountability section at the beginning here as far as blurring out games being shown on Steam or just being shown in general on Firefox. If you make it past the first hour or so of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel in these live streams, I start looking at every single game that gets released on Steam, including adult games. Technically, as I understand it, since it's news reporting and you're not emphasizing that, showing the occasional screenshot with nudity in it is okay. My channel's so small, I haven't gotten any kind of like warnings or community guideline strikes or anything like that, but frankly my channel's so small, I'm not sure I ever would get that because I'm not sure they're even bothering to scan the footage. But trying to stay within the lines of the rules of YouTube, I thought of in the last stream a way that we could ideally try and blur that. And so there is a couple of blurs. One like uses a ridiculous amount of CPU power or GPU power, but then there's a cheaper way by just lowering the resolution of the image and then stretching the image back. Now, in the case of Lake Haven Chrysalis, which we'll use as an example here, like you're already talking low polygon 3D images. So there isn't really the best amount of detail. It probably would make more sense to find a different game that is higher detailed and has more recognizable elements. Which, yeah, a lot of games don't. Okay. Bad Kids, again, not really a good example. I would need something that was fully 3D and as detailed as possible and as human-like as possible. So this one screenshot might be the best example. Here we go. Stick on this one screenshot. So you've got three faces. Now noticeably I have the news tickers at the top. I'm not sure what value they have, but they do something different. And I have in the top right Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel being shown. But when I come over to the blur, this is what it would look like. It lowers the resolution incredibly low and makes it very blurred out. Now, inherently, in the adult games, a lot of the screenshots are just a full image of this is the crotch of a lady taking up 30% of the entire screen. And even at that blur, it's pretty identifiable, I would imagine. I haven't experimented here. So today will be a bit of an experiment. Now, on the blur, I did get rid of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Thing because to turn on this blur, I am making visible a layer on above Yu-Gi-Oh's video. So I have to hit a key when I'm done playing with Yu-Gi-Oh, which that is pretty much how this is going nowadays, is that I'm just not playing Yu-Gi-Oh when I'm talking about games that came out on video on Steam. So I have to toggle the layer on, and it just overlaps it and hides Yu-Gi-Oh! So there's no real reason to show Yu-Gi-Oh! At that point. So it needs a little bit more tweaking, either to keep the video game news ticker, stretch that out a little bit more, to cover the full width, which that's easy enough to do. I could also put just an image there, some like censored image, or if I really had any artistic skill, you might go too hot for for YouTube, something like that. But I think I'll probably just stretch the tickers out. Now, as far as a visual composition, is a blurred image great? No. Is there some better way we could do this? If with more CPU, GPU power, sure. You could do a more traditional blur where this is really just a pixelated mosaic blur. Something closer to like a Gaussian blur. But it is the Gaussian blur that takes all the GPU power. Is there some other artwork that would be better to show, or some other way to depict adult content? I don't know. But this is the quick and dirty. This took me maybe an hour or two yesterday to do, and that was about it. So I will now hit the shortcut key, and then that should disable the image, and then when I come over this way and come back, it will enable it. It enables and disables the image, but it does not change it automatically. It only it waits until the next transition. So yeah, no changes were made to the regular web peak scene here, so we still have everything the same there. I spent most of yesterday, Thursday, today is Friday, January 20th, I should have said that earlier, spent doing something else, so I didn't really accomplish too much. I did get a couple of episodes of Dicey Dungeon recorded, and having a little bit of a break between Dicey Dungeon, I imagine, did help me somewhat, as far as just not getting overly burnt out on it. I also, just before I started streaming, changed my ad blocking settings for Twitter, because Twitter is by default changing me over to the For You tab, and so every time I look at Twitter, there's an odd silence there, just like no sound and then sound, like they just straight up haven't made the sound effects yet, or they've taken sound effects out. Yeah, for a game that's as old as Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is now, it's odd to have sound effects just straight up feel like they're missing. If they had come out and said they had removed some sound effects for, I guess, blind people or people hard of vision to play, that would be interesting, but it would also be insane, because you would have to have some kind of compatibility layer to a braille reader, basically, to play Yu-Gi-Oh! If you were blind. Because you'd have to be able to, like, well, I guess maybe screen readers might be advanced enough that it could read all the text on cards, but you would have to read really, really fast. And a lot of this text does not show up unless you're clicking on certain things, and how would you even know where your mouse is? So that doesn't seem like that would be the reason why you would get rid of sound effects, really, and make the experience less for the 99.9% of your players, for the one special needs person who maybe could muddle through a game. Yeah, do I have anything else to say about the accountability section? I've been working with some new Tuya smart bulbs, and I have twice now thought I got it working, and twice now found it not working the next morning. There is a weirdness certainly around what I'm trying to do that it just doesn't want to cooperate with, as far as when you flip a light switch to turn on a bulb, it takes it a while to connect to the Wi-Fi. That is just Wi-Fi. Arguably, this is why you should have Zigbee bulbs, and arguably this is an argument for having like Zigbee light switches and regular bulbs versus smart bulbs themselves. Although I still would lean into the idea that being able to control a bulb and change its colors is just features like dim and to specific percentages, control the color, put it in different like music reactive modes or color blinking modes. Those are all things that you just cannot add by adding a smart switch. And really those are the things that increase the increase the value switching from I mean I already had like first generation LED bulbs that I've been using for probably 6, 7, 8 years now, and ideally you would have thought that they would have lasted forever, and I would have kept them forever if there hadn't been the possibilities. It's just like a whole new world of possibilities when things can potentially work. Now, can and do are two different things, and so I am really struggling to find a signal that is 100% or even close to 100% consistent that the Tuya Smart Life app will recognize to know when the bulb is turned on. And then there is a lot of manipulation that I'm having to jump around to potentially I'm just going to activate this so I stopped getting asked if I want to activate it. Have bulbs turn off. Like the overall goal is to flip one light switch that's near the doorway, turn on all the lights in the entire room, which in this case this is a kitchen, dining, and extra room that are all attached to each other with basically no walls in between them. So there is no less than 9 bulbs that right now I'm working on getting turned on, and I could add another 3 bulbs easily to that. So you're talking 12 bulbs, each which are individually on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 switches, and that's a lot. In a lot of people's cases, if you're in a small house, if you're in a more closed-in house and you just don't have a region like that, it's probably a little less likely that you would want to flip the light bulb on in the hallway when you walk in through the front door and have all the lights in the entire house turn on. But you could see some people wanting that. Or turning on a light in the garage, turning on all the lights in the entire house. These things do have timing schedules, and I'm avoiding the timing schedule aspect of it, but that is definitely the fallback plan too, is that if all else fails, just have the bulbs come on the schedule. But schedules are way less accurate than on demand of just flipping a light switch on and when you walk in a room and flipping it off. It's not really a power saving issue so much, because the powering of an LED is basically nothing compared to an old style light bulb. Like, it went from a 60-watt original bulb actually using 60 watts to a compact fluorescent tube bulb using about 6 watts roughly, and then to LEDs using about 0.6 watts. So it's a factor of 10 in efficiency, and arguably I would say LEDs even now are not efficient enough, but they're pretty darn efficient. If anything, they're not bright enough. Like the new bulbs I got are 60 watt equivalents, and they're putting out about 800 lumens, and they're replacing LEDs that were doing like 1500 lumens. And honestly, I could barely see a difference there, but the other persons that are looking at the bulbs are telling me that there's a big difference there, and I'm like, okay, I guess I just don't have that range of brightness. And whatever, so brighter is better. Also, the 100 watt bulbs I originally purchased that are no longer available, while maybe a little bit more expensive, are programmed with a little bit more features. And that is one thing you will find with Tuya Smart Life products, is that they let each cheap Chinese manufacturer program their devices in slightly different ways, and some will have features that others won't, and they won't advertise any of that particularly well. So you will get two devices that look very similar and react very similar, but one has one feature that the other doesn't. And in particular, in this case, and I know I'm rambling about something that only I care about, sorry about that. In this particular case though, the 100 light bulbs have a timer circuit that I'm hoping I can get to turn on every time power is given to the bulb, and it looked like that was working. And by setting the timer circuit to any random time, I can then check to see if the timer is within a incredibly small range, and then you'll have just an incredibly high chance that it won't be in that range, and then that'll be an indicator to say the bulb was just turned on. So I mean, that's a very backwards way of doing things, but a lot of the programs I've done have been fairly backwards. You can't trigger a scene just when a device goes offline. That would be super helpful. If you could say, this device is offline, obviously it's lost power. At that point, let's just consider it turned off and turn off all the other bulbs. That would be so easy. But instead, what I'm having to do is turn on timers to all the bulbs when they turn on, and then reset the timers when they get below a minute to back up to being 2 minutes, and just every minute checking like you would a computer program or a loop. So it's just constantly checking to see if the one bulb that's on the light switch is still on, and if it is, reset the timers on all the other bulbs. And as soon as that fails because the bulb is not on, then a minute later they will turn off. And it sounds so easy when you say it out loud, or at least relatively easy, but yeah, the reactionness as far as whether those triggers actually trigger is inconsistent at best. And you need 100% consistency. Really, there's no way around it. I've had better consistency with power monitoring outlets. So if I wanted to try and throw some kind of device in the wall to monitor the amount of power going through a circuit, just specifically to turn on all the other bulbs, yes, I could have done that. But that is adding something in the wall. And that's really where you don't want to go. Switching light bulbs is something an end user is very is something an end user homeowner can do very easily. Switching out, pulling out a light switch and doing electrical wiring is not so much something that you would want to have a regular homeowner do. Because that's much more dangerous. Although there is still, even at that, a level of danger. In even putting in a light bulb, because some of those three-way switch light bulbs can be somewhat dangerous too if they're wired wrong. Let's see. Would I want to special summon any of this? Let's see. What can we special summon now? 25? Yeah, I think that's probably your best bet, is to special summon this. What can we special summon now? Nothing. What can we activate now? That was the wrong one to discard. Nope, 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 don't want to do that. That is a lot of playing for one turn. So probably over the weekend, to wrap up the accountability section and the rambling section at the beginning, which probably loses me a lot of views. Let's just be honest. I more than likely should rethink it and just jump into the news much quicker. Go into kind of an accountability section if I need to do an accountability section at all, which arguably I don't. It doesn't mean anything. It's just me talking about random things. Well, I think we've potentially just got a victory here, so I can't say this is a bad deck when we win, but also the opponent did not play at all there. So we'll take that victory. Yeah. Over the weekend I'll try to play some more Dicey Dungeon, and I'll be wasting energy, I think, on smart bulbs. If I can get this to work, it'll be amazing. If I can't get it to work, it's going to be frustrating. And maybe starting Monday, we will just start with news. Like, it wouldn't be too hard to just immediately start to go to news. Like, Video Games Chronicles here says Ubisoft CEO reportedly apologizes to devs for the ball is in your court comments. Yves Guillemot seemingly suggests Adonis was on the staff to reverse the company's fortune. At a certain level, that is what a boss is always going to say. Um, and at a certain level, it is kind of true because CEOs don't do anything and really arguably shouldn't exist. Uh, like, you need somebody leading the ship, yes, but when you have a C-suite of people who are supposedly making decisions but aren't really making any decisions, and then you have an owner who's making the real decision, or a CEO who's making the decision, then there's just too many cooks in the kitchen. Almost all decisions are being made by lower upper management, which that's, I suppose, a bit of an oxymoron to say that, but like, it is the managers who actually deal with employees that are making propositions and proposals, and they are then the ones that are selling those proposals to the C-suite people, who very possibly are showing up once a month to have a meeting and then being pitched the other managers. And if your company is just so incredibly big that you need a C-suite of employees, then your company's just too big, in my opinion, and really should just be broken up. Like, ideally, when you have presidents and CEOs, that's the biggest problem. But yeah, there is definitely, it really is on the employees of Ubisoft at some level, or the management of Ubisoft at some level, to turn around Ubisoft's thing. Yves Guillemot could say the absolute perfect thing, and if the managers and the game developers and the programmers and the associate level employees aren't making good products, then the products won't sell. It's just that simple. And the vast, oh man, I really walked into that one. It is the vast majority of the problems of Ubisoft over the past 10 or 15 years that they have just not been making good decisions on a management level, and they even now aren't probably making that good of decisions on the management level. There's still way too much forced multiplayer, way too much DLC, way too much bad elements in Ubisoft games trying to monetize people. Every time you get something like Assassin's Creed Origins, you then have a ton of monetization wrapped into that, or forced multiplayer. Ubisoft has been definitely the main main problem. Let's see. They've been the leader of problematic game concepts. See if we can special summon this. Okay. We are definitely at a point now where we are just in a layoff season of sorts. Darn it. With Microsoft in particular announcing over 10,000 people being laid off, even though when you actually get into the details of the layoffs, they're actually allowing a lot of those people to potentially re-interview, which is better than just laying them off, and they're giving them like a lot of benefits, a lot of which may not be really required in Washington State. Microsoft definitely is doing a little bit of union busting, I think, in this, that they are laying off people before they start thinking about unionizing themselves. But they had like 40,000 people that they hired in their last hiring rush a year or two ago. So them laying off 11,000 people now is really just a case of them adjusting. And Google has also announced layoffs. I mean, obviously the Stadia staff, the entirety of the Stadia staff, would have to be reassigned or laid off since Stadia has been shut down. Inherently, the system is broken, and we need to re-evaluate the way employment is thought about, if employment is even going to be a thing at all in the future, and stop living to what is really thousands of years old concepts. And in a lot of ways, the United States breaks thousands of years old concepts in that everybody of lower and middle class would work, because the United States gets rid of the middle class, and the upper class aristocracy type people are expected to pretend to work and expected to still gain money. It is not acceptable in the United States culture for you to have an idiot royal, say like Prince Andrew, who does basically nothing and just sucks on the inheritance of the royalty, which one way or the other, it still comes out of the pockets and through stealing economic value through the lower classes. In the royalty sake, it's the royals, the kings and queens that were taxing the peasants and taking their hard work. Or in the United States oligarchy concept, it's rich people investing in companies to allow companies to then do massive amounts of wage theft, which is never talked about, and just underpaying of employees. But the whole system is really broken. We've been talking about for probably 200 years now that automation was going to make everything easier, and that there was going to be less need for labor, particular the agricultural revolution, where you don't need 5 out of your 6 sons to work the farms, and once that happened, we have been struggling to make up jobs and create office jobs that are nothing close to the backbreaking laborious jobs that would have existed before then. And yeah, nothing is going to be solved until we start to say, well, as a government, you either want to bribe your citizens to not revolt on you out of boredom alone, or and just give them universal basic income for that reason, or you want to just bribe them to be a willing member of society at some level, whether that means doing mandatory military service or at least military preparation, like, or what. But yeah, the dollar now is given out almost exclusively at a baseline for labor, and we've got to embrace an idea of giving out the dollar as just a good boy cookie point, or we believe you're a human being and we value human beings, which I don't think a government would ever willingly admit that they value human beings. no government with a military can really make that big of an argument. But yeah. And yeah. That is certainly, to some extent, what we have seen some of that with, like, some of the Middle Eastern countries where I think Iran is probably a great example. You put up with, I imagine the Iranian citizens put up with a lot because they're getting a lot of oil funds and a lot of opulence, and a rich lifestyle. And once the price of gas in, I think it was Iran, skyrocketed for a brief second there, all of a sudden the citizenship was not as happy with the way the government was going. Because, yeah, what does it matter if you're getting thousands of dollars from the oil fields when the price of gas themselves is taking that thousands of dollars back? Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question that I just thought of. Whether I'm better off rambling in the accountability section about something that has nothing to do with video games, or if I'm better off rambling about economics that is somewhat associated with the with Microsoft layoffs. Moving on, let's see. A lot of these are fairly old stories. I'm gonna do this one. I vaguely recall there might have been something about that card. Nope. Maybe I just thought a bird looked interesting. What would a fusion... What could I fuse? Plunder patrol ship? Let's activate this effect and see what happens. So, Video Games Chronicle says Halo Infinite's head of creative Joseph Staten is reportedly leaving the studio. He's rejoining Xbox Publishing. He was supposed to head the ship of Halo Infinite. I assume that we take from that Halo Infinite is as good as it's going to get, or it's on the right track, is I guess the most optimistic thing you could possibly hope for there. Interesting. This guy keeps doing things, or I keep doing things. So by the time I get around to actually being able to attack, I'm super powerful, but it takes forever. Yeah, we already mentioned Google Stadia has been shut down, so yeah. You still have time to convert your Stadia controller to Bluetooth, and I imagine they'll probably leave that site up permanently. There's probably little value in shutting down the site that would help you flash the Stadia controller to a Bluetooth mode. Even though they did say they were going to take it down at a certain time, and you probably should take their word for it. Flashing it is a lot like flashing the Circuit Playground Adafruit device when you're using Circuit Playground Express or any of those online block snap editors, because you can actually allow direct access to a device, and then they can flash the firmware, which in a lot of ways it is not, I think, connecting through a COM port and sending serial information when it's flashing like that. I think it is probably just uploading a file to a special partition. That's how Circuit Python works, is that when you plug it into a computer in a certain mode, you see a hard drive, you drop a file in there, that binary file then gets read and the device gets reset into a different mode. Which that is definitely different from like flashing something using a special burner type program. Let's see. The first hour of Forspoken gameplay is leaked ahead of next week's release. One of the things I guess I should have said about the accountability section, and this is, I just don't care about Forspoken, so I'm not even saying anything more to it. Here it seems like I'm seeing a new character for the first time. Oh, now I've lost my train of thought. There was something I could have been doing, and now I've forgotten what it was. Which is, it's no wonder I don't accomplish much, as I'm ADHD enough to just think of something and then forget it immediately. Alright, well, moving on. Former Halo developers criticized Microsoft for the 343 Industries layoff. Incompetent leadership is blamed for Halo Infinite's rocky development. Yeah, poop should always roll uphill. So I can agree with these criticisms. And from the outside looking in, you can never really be certain, and you just never really will be certain. This is, by the way, just the way Twitter tweets are going to look, which it's actual text, so I don't know why people wouldn't make a third-party app to take this actual text and make it look better. I did definitely also hear an argument for Twitter doing that in particular, because by forcing people to have a worse experience looking at tweets off of Twitter, you are trying to push people to go to the actual Twitter website and look at actual Twitter ads versus Video Games Chronicles. If I didn't have ad blockers on, would have at least ads for its own self. Even now, each one of these underlined words is a link to some other page on Video Games Chronicles themselves, basically an ad to get you to stay on Video Games Chronicles. Yeah. When you have delay after delay after delay, you can't blame an associate level employee or associate employees in general for the second delay, the third delay, the fourth delay. You could possibly blame the associate employees for the first delay if they were just really not doing their jobs or just were really incompetent. Yes, a manager could push the blame that time. But then you definitely are getting into the point of trying to blame somebody else for your own incompetence as a manager the second time there's a second delay. Because once that first delay happens, you've got to make the big changes. You got to either hire new staff, you got to crack down on the current staff that's not getting the work done. You got to realize that your expectations were not realistic in the first place, which is very often the case. But once you let that become the status quo and continue to allow employees to have delays, that falls on management. There's no way it doesn't. And I could certainly throw out a personal opinion that maybe a lot of video game companies have managers who want to just have fun or be friendly instead of being the boss, and that's all well and good until the product fails and the product's low quality. I think video game companies in particular need to be run a lot more like businesses and a lot less like frat houses. And we have definitely heard the stories of video game companies being run like frat houses. But then on the other hand, you have the example of Valve, where Valve has found a way to make insane amounts of money and produce absolutely nothing otherwise. And they've been able to get away with that for an extremely long amount of time because of Steam. And if anything, the reason Valve is designed the way it is because Gabe Newell was treated like an actual worker and at Microsoft, and Microsoft was really doing a bunch of stack ranking, which stack ranking sucks and is wrong, but at the very least, at that time, in those divisions of Microsoft, they were actually trying to make Microsoft be like a business. Whereas I think as the Xbox gaming divisions acquired companies, they did not adopt a culture of, well, a manager would call it a culture of excellence. I'll call it a culture of hard work, if not overwork. And certainly that gets to kind of a core problem with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, Microsoft acquiring any of the other companies as far as video game companies, and Xbox is just being run very differently from the way I think the rest of Microsoft is being run, and they are having an incredibly hands-off aspect to it, allowing there to be multiple cultures when there is a unified expectation at the top of Xbox Game Studios and at the top of Microsoft in general, as far as the shareholders are concerned too. So I've long wanted to see the Microsoft start to merge and lay off a decent amount of the employees in the middle management in their acquisitions, and I'm not sure that's what this current layoff is all about, but I'm fairly certain we will see that eventually. Is that we will see Bethesda become just Bethesda, and we'll see ZeniMax go away because we don't need that middle management. And we potentially will see some big names who were like presidents of Double Fine get merged or get eliminated, or at least get sidelined severely. As far as other layoffs, Riot Games has made layoffs across several departments. Update: the company has eliminated 46 jobs in a round of cuts. Yeah, I almost said 46 damage there. I'm thinking of Dicey Dungeons. I don't know how big Riot is, but I imagine it's not big enough to say 46 jobs is nothing. This is really where you would need to get into the details of just do we have a estimate of how many employees worked at Riot in the first place? And that's where we see video game journalism really failing miserably. Speaking of miserable failures, after Adam Sessler kind of went on a drunken rampage, and from what I hear, I didn't actually sit through it, but yeah, Adam Sessler has always been kind of weird and crazy. But like, he definitely seems to have gone on a rampage on Twitter, attacking people, tweeting him, attacking gamers in particular, which is sad because Adam Sessler was potentially the closest. He was the person that people would have respected and said he's got a whole career in video game journalism. He's been doing it for a long time. He for the most part, I don't think had any controversies in the original G4 at all. He had a little bit of controversies in his next venture, which was, I want to say CNET TV, but I don't think that was what it really was. I don't think it was CNET. And particularly in his next venture after the original G4 shut down, he was being the manager there because he was so old. He was pretty old even in the original G4. But yeah, he's always been a little weird, and he's attacked gamers. He went on this rant. He somewhat took a sideswipe at Frost Curran, and now the update to that story, that hot mess of people going on podcasts and burning their entire legacy to the ground, is that Frost Curran has, I think, and again, I'm not really following this drama because it is mostly drama. I think she's pretty much said she's done with games too, and she's leaving esports and leaving games. Which, if she really was an esports player, she's probably so old at this point that she would have not been competitive anyways. That is just the sad truth of esports, is that once you hit about 20, 25, your fingers are so arthritic and worn out from the massive amount of button mashing that you really wouldn't compete. Also, there is another drama I haven't followed where an esports league is like losing massive amounts of money or owes a massive amount of money, which, yeah, esports in itself always felt like it was not really a viable thing. I just don't know if there are that many gamers out there who want to watch other people play esports style games as much as it was just being pushed. If anything, you look at a declining popularity of like NFL football and pretty much every other popular sport that's ever existed, there's not an increase in watching other people play any kind of games, video games or otherwise, because in part because video games are interactive and accessible. You can't go and play professional level football if you're just an average Joe. You can play Madden, so why would you watch other people in an esports tournament play Madden to a level that would be profitable? You also have to realize too what profitable would really mean, because yeah, when you've got entire stadium like event centers that you're renting out, you've got to charge ridiculous amounts of prices of tickets, just like if you go to an NFL game, you're getting charged ridiculous amounts of money for tickets, or if you're watching it on TV, you're paying a ridiculous amount for cable to see those sports shows. Esports alone would have to really struggle to make that kind of profit. And it just never really felt like gaming to me, personally. It just always felt like it was a pseudo fake, like shadow or of what gaming would be or could be. That it's something masquerading as gaming when it really isn't gaming. Yeah, I'm just gonna guess end the turn here. But yeah. Moving on with Video Games Chronicles articles, Ubisoft confirms that its player versus player game Project Q has been cancelled. The publisher is currently reallocating its team to priority projects, it claims. Looking at this screenshot of Project Q, I don't recognize this game, but I do vaguely feel like there was a game somewhat similar to this that was announced less than a year ago, less than 6 months ago, and maybe that was Project Q. But these characters don't seem like that. If anything, this may just highlight how this generic image makes potentially a generic thought of a generic game in my head instead of a standout thought that is very iconic and recognizable. It is almost certainly no loss for Ubisoft to cancel a project. But if we were to go back to the previous controversy around Ubisoft, then the onus really isn't on associate level employees that were working on Project Q or even low level managers that were working on Project Q, because they're not being given a chance to get to the stage where they could actually make a successful product that would make money. It is also worth mentioning that France is like threatening to or did raise the retirement age, and so there's just like a massive amount of protests and strikes happening in France right now amongst all workers, and that may be inspiring a lot of striking at Ubisoft or just Ubisoft's actions in general. We need to, generally people need to lower the retirement age. That would be an easy way, certainly, to dance around doing universal basic income. It'll eventually not work, but if politicians particularly just pander to old people that vote for them by lowering the retirement age, and potentially even giving like back pay to retired people, you could certainly pander to the baby boomers in the United States that way by just lowering the retirement age. Yeah, honestly, if they could get it down, you spend your first 18 years alive or so either preschool, preparing for school, or just drooling in diapers, and then if you spent the next 18 years working, so 18 years of training, 18 years of working, that would sound appealing to a lot of people, versus you come out at 18 and you're expected to work till you're 65 in the United States, which is 18 minus 65 would be, man, I cannot do math at all. 37 years, I believe, is the right number there. Yeah, spending the next 37 years minimum working is not a good offer, and if I could just slowly turn it downward to 35 1 year, then turn it down to 33 years of work, as automation allows that to happen, they could actually jump down to probably about 25 years instantly. And there might also be an argument for just forced retirement, particularly amongst politicians. The amount of age that politicians have is ridiculous. Let's see. Problem with these thematic decks still really comes down to just not, you're just not likely to learn all of this in that amount of time. It is just going to be too much. That was the thing I was thinking about that I needed to potentially work on, is that I need to have more Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay happening, and instead of doing that I'm playing Destiny Child, which is over to a new section, new content. It rolled over to the new monthly content, and then I'm playing 2 or 3 other games. Marvel Snap, which is I'm still playing for some reason. Goblins and Gnomes, which I'm still playing for some reason. I really just need to uninstall those games. Back to video game news. After a year delay, EA's PGA Tour has a release date, which, okay, a year delay is a lot. At a certain level, you would have thought that PGA Tour golf games might have been an annual thing, but I guess there really isn't a reason to have an annual version of a golf game. I'm not sure that there's even a reason to make new versions of golf games. I assume what happens here, in a lot of ways, is EA has its own internal engine. I'm fairly certain that's true. And in that internal engine, they have pretty good realistic character designers, and so they can fairly cheaply make a NBA game, a PGA game, a NFL game, and possibly even a wrestling game, all on similar technology and fairly cheaply, and then they can sell these to sports fans who are willing to pay more than your average gamer. But the actual thought of virtually going to a bunch of golf courses and virtually golfing with no new twist or no arcadey element to it does not appeal to me. I could certainly see if you are the type of person that has trouble standing but used to love the golf, if you're particularly old and disabled, which I think is a significant amount of people who are into golf. I could see that being a sales point if you can't physically go to golf courses. Also, golf courses and course dues are incredibly expensive, so I could see that playing a factor too, where you're getting into golf courses that you could never afford or you could never get access to anyways. But the actual action of golfing is at best something I could imagine doing on a mobile game. Yeah, I can see it maybe being a mobile game and having some kind of like clicker-esque, maybe gotcha element to it to keep bringing you back. But yeah, you'd have to add quite a bit as far as game mechanics to golf itself, which isn't much of a game as far as its game mechanics, to interest me, and I think interest most people. And that's yeah, there's definitely a great argument to get rid of golf courses, in that they generally tend to be exempt from any watering restrictions. They're all wasting a ridiculous amount of water to water grass that is not native and not natural to an area. They are removing a lot of trees and farmland potentially. Although a lot of golf courses, I think, are built on top of old junkyards or trash heaps. But yeah, you certainly could do something better with the land than most golf courses. I don't know if I really want to switch to a different card deck here. I mean, I'm not making massive amounts of success, but I don't know if I even want to play anymore, actually. Yeah, I'll make this our last game. Moving on to Video Games Chronicles, the Epic Games Store's next free title has been confirmed. Adios will replace Epic Story Typing Chronicles, which is currently free. I'm not sure what Adios is. Interestingly, here they don't really explain what Adios is as a game. Adios is a cinematic first-person game about a pig farmer sticking to a complicated decision, namely that he no longer wants to dispose of bodies for the mob. Well, once you're in, you're always in when you're working for the mob. And feeding bodies to pigs is hardly a low-level job that you could get out. If you want out, they're gonna kill you. I imagine they'd pay you pretty good for that too. That being said, if you're feeding bodies to pigs, which pigs will eat a human body eventually if they're hungry enough, there's probably going to be like fingers and things that would get into the digestive tracts of the pigs once the pigs are being butchered. So you probably couldn't ever butcher your pigs, and you would need to be compensated for that. They have talked about in TV and movies feeding people to pigs. I think in the Hannibal TV show there's an element to that, and there's other stories I think that have talked about that, but I think more likely most bodies are getting dumped in rivers or dissolved in acid. But fiction does not need to be real by any means, so you don't really have to hold it to high standards of realism. I probably should put that there instead. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Sony has confirmed its full PlayStation VR 2 launch games, including Rez and Tetris Effects. 13 new titles have been revealed for the headset. Here we can see there's a whole collection of images here, which are frankly too small for me to see. I can make out a couple of these, but some of these I definitely have trouble with. Let's see if they maybe did us the kindness of writing it down in actual text format. Okay. I think you want this. So then you can activate this. Maybe going in circles here. Yeah, that didn't work. Alright, so the list here is After the Fall, Altar Breaking Before Your Eyes. I'm not going to bother to read all of this. Let me just point out the ones that might be interesting. Cities VR is interesting in the idea that you're going to really need to zoom in and zoom out in any kind of city sim game. Creed's Rise to Glory Championship Edition. This is, a lot of these are also being labeled in the launch window, which means they aren't coming day one. The Creed Rise to Glory game, though, was not well received, even though I really wish it had been. And so you're going to have a weird mix here of games that are ports that almost certainly are better to play outside of VR. Cities is also a very long game, so playing that in VR is going to be exhausting very quickly. I could see an argument for a racing game like Gran Turismo 7 going VR. Horizon Call of the Mountain potentially being a VR-only spin-off of Horizon games. And probably an older one, Job Simulator, maybe makes some sense. Moss 1 and 2 were made specifically, I think, for VR. Resident Evil Village in VR is going to be a weird adjustment. Res Infinite in VR. Even in like the case of Res Infinite, where it probably should work, it's probably not going to work as well as you would think, because there is a limited field of view in which enemies have been programmed to come from in Res Infinite. So if you turn your head to the left or right 90 degrees, you're not really going to see anything. Tetris Effect, I don't know if that actually is going to be any benefit to have a Tetris game in VR. Thumper, same kind of things. Like, adding VR effectively expands your field of view from what would probably be 90 degrees, maybe 120 degrees at most, to 360 degrees, where the rest of those degrees are going to be mostly empty. Nothing here stands out as an amazingly new product or as something that would be really a system seller for VR2, when VR2 itself is selling at $550 as effectively its own console, which it says PlayStation VR2 or PSVR2, which I assume means you still need a $500 PlayStation 5 for it. And you can't play existing PlayStation VR games, VR1 games. Let's see, moving on. Here's the first look at Marvel's Midnight Suns Deadpool DLC. Check that out if you're interested. They zoomed up this image too much, so it's blurry. The Last of Us co-director has called for unionization after not getting HBO credit. Maybe we need unions in the video game industry to be able to protect creators. Boy, is that just stating the obvious. Pretty much every job needs a union. You would make a hard argument that there's a single industry out there that doesn't need a union. Even if not every single office or business needs a union. But honestly, on the face of it, not getting into any of the weeds of the realities of having unions, you have a choice on one hand of unionization representing a democratic process in which employees can negotiate for better wages and better work conditions, or you have non-unions representing a authoritarian process in which workers barely have any rights at all and can't negotiate for better work or labor conditions, and they're just being given whatever the boss says. I'll try one of these, I guess. I think, though, it is worth pointing out that this is a very Hollywood thing to also happen, for somebody to be cut out of the credits. Bruce Straley co-directed the 2013 Last of Us game, left Naughty Dog shortly after the release of Uncharted 4. He's not getting credited now for the Last of Us TV show as the original concept creator, which, if he was in SAG-AFTRA, this almost certainly would have gone to arbitration, and almost certainly he would have gotten an original concept creator credit at the least, even though he is not in any way involved with, or seemingly he's not in any way involved with the development of the TV show. And particularly in a TV show example, getting credited leads to potentially getting residuals if the Hollywood accounting never actually pays out residuals. But it's just a nasty thing to do. These stories always really stick to the hearts of people who hear them. When you have Steve Jobs stealing Apple, taking all the credit for everything done in Apple. When you have Bill Gates basically allowing all the credit to be put on him for Microsoft. Elon Musk, most recently, trying to take all the credit for everything done at SpaceX and the Boeing company and Tesla, when obviously there's other people that were involved. It's slimy, to say the least. Rich people want not only all the money they can get, they want all the credit they can get, even if they don't deserve it. And that's why inherently there's no such thing as a rich person who's an honest person or who's a good person, is because you don't become rich without doing something that's at least a little immoral. Not to say it's always not legal, but it's always immoral. Here we have a story on Video Games Chronicles that kind of smacks in the direct face of the statement that was said by I believe it was Major Nelson at a developer conference, where he was talking about how game developers need to stop making a barrier, or they need to help break down barriers between players and game developers, and that they need to be unified and on the same page and not antagonistic against each other. Well, the other hand here is you have a Video Games Chronicles talking about a survey here where the majority of developers see player harassment as a serious issue. Now, when they say player harassment, do they mean players harassing game developers, or do they mean players harassing other players? Because that's two different things, but it gets overlapped and confused. In this case, it says 40% surveyed said they've experienced harassment, where that also smacks in the face of, I don't want to call game developers a bunch of whiny babies, but the numbers arguably don't lie. When you look at harassment in schools, which is just kind of a natural amount of harassment, it's too high, certainly, and it should be fought as much as is reasonable to fight it. But when you look at the numbers of harassment and surveys of kids who have been harassed in schools, it's practically everybody. Like at some point, you're going to be harassed. Hopefully, it's from other kids who don't know any better. Hopefully, you're not being harassed by adults that definitely should know better, and or people in authority that definitely should not be harassing. The truth is, in schools, a lot of times teachers are the harassers, and they encourage harassment, and they engage in it and create it. But yeah, when you say only 40%, and that's really the way to look at it, of people surveyed have experienced harassment, then that shows that there's actually about 60% less harassment than you would expect. There should be some small amount of harassment in a regular survey of people that is much higher. And even if you don't compare it to other situations, when only 40% of game developers say they've been harassed, then you kind of have to call them whiny babies. Like, because if it was a major, a serious issue, and maybe the word serious is the wrong word to use, because yes, I guess it can be a serious issue when it isn't even a prevalent issue. Maybe there's a difference that you should make there. But generally speaking, a serious issue should be at least 50%. Like, at least 50% of people have been harassed before you'd even say it's a serious issue. And you have to put this in the context, certainly, of what people claim harassment is versus what most people would generally accept as actual harassment. And the fact that there are a lot of people that cry wolf or are legitimately harassed and yet make a huge deal with it. I talked about Pure Living for Life as a YouTube channel coming back after several years of just being totally silent, and they have just gone insanely wild with putting out content, posts, videos, all talking about how they feel they were harassed off the internet or claimed to have been harassed off the internet. Well, why are they back on the internet at this point if they were so scared? But it is definitely just way too much posts about that and no new posts about what their channel originally was. Which, if I was a fair-weather fan of Pure Living for Life, I would unsubscribe from them at this point, because now they're flooding my YouTube feed with content that I have no interest in at all. And honestly, I will have to I will have to unsubscribe from them fairly quickly. The actual numbers here say 75% of game developers responding to an industry survey believe harassment and toxic behavior from players is a serious and very serious issue. There you again have convoluted it in that you've put two different things together as far as harassment or toxic behavior. And obviously you've loaded the survey in such a way in which there obviously was check here for not serious, or not an issue at all, or neutral, serious, and very serious. And that's going to push people to say, well, obviously it's at least serious. Whereas if you maybe had put it from how serious on a scale of 1 to 10 would you consider it, and just admitted that yes, you people already have made up your minds that it is serious, so let's see how serious you're really concerned. And yeah, lying with polls and statistics. 2,300 game developers were polled by Axios. 91% of respondents agreed that player harassment and toxicity toward developers was an issue. About 4% of respondents said it was not an issue, while 5% indicated they were unsure. So it was like Let's see. Not an issue and unsure were obviously options too. And so two serious and very serious have been talked about, and then not sure and not an issue were the other options, which doesn't even really balance out the scale. But this 40% speaks way more volumes in that they just can't back up their concerns. And you would hope from these numbers that game developers would learn a lesson there and say, wait a minute, we are way too obsessed about this when only 40% of us even feel like we have been harassed, and we already know that those numbers are actually going to be severely inflated to begin with, because there are definitely people who always feel like they're being harassed no matter what. There's a lot of Karens, for lack of a better term, in the gaming industry. And sadly, there's just not a good situation here, or a good way to push back at it. Because if players themselves try to point out anything, then they'll just get attacked and called gamergaters or something like that. If gamers themselves tried to organize anything, then it would just be attacked and called a gamergate group. The best case scenario is that you would have to waste a lot of energy and time of gamers to form a committee, a action group of some sort that would claim that it's 100% against player toxicity in games, and then slowly just try to bring people back to realism and reality, and say, oh, actually toxicity in games is way less than we thought, and just bring them to a real perception versus the fictional propagandized perception that is being talked about and shown now. Or maybe you could get a organization that is around like school bullying to potentially like attack these kinds of surveys and the obsession around video games in favor of actually addressing actual harassment and bullying in school. But you know what? Most of the organizations that are anti-school bullying and things like that, they probably love the idea that gamers are toxic, because it's something that they can also latch onto and get more donations from, and it's something easy that they could potentially attack and control, whereas actually fixing bullying in schools would require school systems to cooperate and teachers and principals to cooperate, and it's way easier to just have a game censor people's speech in chat or something similar to that, or just block people from playing games. Moving on, we'll try and burn through the news fairly quickly now. We did make a lot of progress. Looking at the timer, I suppose it's an hour and 28 minutes into the stream. So if I talk about news for the next hour and 28 minutes, which is unlikely, then the whole accountability section at the beginning, no, I don't need to talk for another hour and 28 minutes. I only really need to talk for another 20 minutes about the news, because that's how long the accountability section was. But yeah, I do think I could probably get rid of the accountability section totally, or I'll just probably integrate it into talking about news as I'm going. Let's see, the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition has been released on Steam with deck support. The collection is also 50% off. This, I believe, was the awful port that I guess was an Epic Game Store exclusive, and it would be interesting, I guess, to see the reception on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if the reception is not particularly good. There you have mixed reviews of 123 for GTA 3. You have mostly positive reviews for Vice City and mostly positive for San Andreas. So that doesn't look terrible, but arguably $30 for fairly old games is still a little expensive. And I wonder what 70% off is, because it's only 50% off for this. Let's see. 67% off for Red Dead Redemption 2. 63% off for GTA 5 Premium Edition. 75% off for Shark Card bundles, which is microtransactions. Episode GTA 4 is 70% off for $5. That's probably your best bet. And then some Max Payne games for 70% off. LA Noire is 70% off. LA Noire for $6 is a good get. Manhunt for $3.49. That would be arguably one to get. Noticeably, though, you're unlikely to see any new GTA or Rockstar games coming out anytime soon, so them selling now is probably to boost their sales for the next quarter. Video Games Chronicle says in its 7th year, Nintendo is reportedly planning to increase Switch production. Despite its aging status, consumer demand remains high for the console. Yep. There is, I think, definitely an argument around the Switch where the idea of single screen sharing for co-op should have potentially been abandoned. To say you need two Switches, you need a Switch and a Switch Lite, potentially to play multiplayer, or you need to play multiplayer online. If Nintendo was better at doing online, they would have gotten rid of co-op for a lot of the third-party games, if not even first-party games. NetEase has publicly teared down the World of Warcraft statue following a Blizzard rift. The Chinese company has been vocal about its anger at the partnership collapse. I feel like, not really knowing this story, it is unrealistic from a Western or American United Statesian perspective for NetEase to be publicly upset about anything, because Chinese companies in general, and I am very much just stereotyping here, are all shady. They all do nasty things. They all do, frankly, probably illegal things with their partners and their competitors. So to be upset that the way that business is done, which is shady in China, was done by a Western company is kind of crazy. But maybe that is also part of Chinese culture. It's just to publicly show anger. Of course, this could also be less of a anger thing as far as NetEase is really thinking, and that it's more just video game journalism trying to hype up anger. If there's been a split between Blizzard and NetEase, why would they keep this statue in there? Why not tear it down? Particularly when a lot of Chinese construction happens all the time, so tearing something down is not super crazy. If anything, I would say If anything, I would say this is just whatever. Like, who cares? It doesn't make NetEase look good or like somebody you would want to do business with if they are going to insult you after the fact. It's just another argument not to do business with NetEase or do business in China in general. Let's see. NetEase apparently described Blizzard as this, which translates to riding a donkey while looking for a horse, trying to stay with NetEase while looking for a more attractive deal, which that doesn't really sound that insulting. I can't help but assume some of this is just straight up the censorship laws not allowing or not making it easy enough to sell Blizzard games in China. But yeah, sure, let NetEase tear down their thing and say nasty things. If anything, this is better for the game industry if NetEase is not going to act professionally and are going to throw pathetic, limp-wristed tantrums when they lose a contract. It just shows that fewer people should do business with NetEase. So, in a lot of cases, letting people show their true colors is like the best bet. Sniper Rangers on the chat, he says, hello, play one more game on Master Duel, I miss so much. Nope, sorry, you'll have to rewind. Right now, the network timed out anyways. Let's see, the PC version of Raving Rabbids is currently free to download. I assume this is through Uplay and you can't just get it on Steam. Let's see. Yeah. Maybe on the Epic Game Store, actually. Yeah, through Ubisoft Connect. I guess they've changed the Uplay to Ubisoft Connect now, or maybe that's a different system. The Callisto Protocol, the latest update, has included a new Game Plus mode. It also fixes the protocol is about life achievement and more. Noticeably, though, I don't think it changes the gameplay or the story anyways, which is the two things I think people mostly didn't like with the Callisto Protocol, is that the story was pretty rough and the gameplay was very dodge heavy. And maybe if you bought this Callisto Protocol now and played through it once and could manage to get to a new Game Plus, then you'd have weapons upgraded enough to get away from the dodge and the stun baton combo that it sounded like pretty much everybody had to play with to win. At some point I would like to experience the Callisto Protocol myself, but I am more than happy to wait until they potentially put in an easy mode that makes it play a lot more like a first-person shooter and less like a dodge and stun baton combo game. Sniper Ranger says, I heard Sparks of Hope is not as good as the first game, but it's still a gem in other ways. That DLC is going to build that argument. Yeah, I think the Raving Rabbids series has succeeded amazingly well, considering how the Rabbids themselves and Rayman games themselves have always been this B-tier series that had there been really only one Rayman game in existence and they had just made other games by other names, that would have been more likely what I would have expected from them. But they really stuck with Rayman as a character and the spin-off Rabbids as characters. They're basically just minions, and as long as minions are popular, I imagine we'll see Rabbids games come out also. Witcher 3 is getting a boxed retail release for the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S next week, according to Video Games Chronicles. The WWE 2K23 release date and box art have seemingly leaked. The game is going to have John Cena on the cover, releasing in March. Do we have a specific March date? March 17th. Yep. The Obsidian boss, Fergus Yorquahart, says he would love to make another Fallout. And see, that is certainly a great contrast of a story compared to NetEase. Instead of publicly tearing down a statue and just making public comments that could hurt your relationship, just stay silent. In particular, the Fallout series has definitely had people that have worked on it for like Fallout New Vegas that I'm sure internally that they really hate that ZeniMax hasn't let them make a new Fallout Vegas 2 and instead focused on Fallout 76 and Fallout 4. But externally they've been pretty quiet about it to just let everybody save face, do the very Japanese thing. Everybody has to save face, everybody has to look like their friends. That's the way business goes. You may hate your partners in reality, but publicly you make it look like everybody's on the same team. I'm not the one to make this comparison, but when you think of professional football or professional sports, almost certainly players hate other players on the same team, but for the most part they don't let that be known, and they pretend like they're all friends and that they go out and hang out together and have meals together and are the best of friends possibly. Now you do have a few competitors of the top tier that are exceptions to that. I think Michael Jordan had a rival of sorts that he was very public with in basketball, but that's kind of a rare exception to the rule. You do get into this weird position, certainly with the Fallout series too, in that everybody feels like they want a new Fallout, but when Fallout 4 came out, there really wasn't that much demand for it, and it wasn't really that amazing. I think the world and the concept of Fallout is perhaps a little dry at this point, and they need another like nuclear war to basically happen. That would make the most sense. They need to go to a different country. They need to have China or some other country attack the United States again. Like, it needs to be something more than just surviving in the post-apocalypse, and it needs to be there's some new threat and something different, something other than the Brotherhood of Steel, which has been the main threat for the first couple of Fallout games. And frankly, it just needs more story too. The ZeniMax let's make very little story around our characters and our world is a big problem around that, and that's why Fallout New Vegas is much better received, is because it was written by a different team that actually wanted to put a more linear narrative story in it. But yeah, you make a Fallout game now, or you let everybody make a Fallout game now, Microsoft should, or what's going to happen is we're going to very quickly have Stalker games outnumbering Fallout games, and Stalker games are not that different, really. It's still post-apocalypse. It's a little bit more realistic. It's less silly, and maybe Stalker games are a little bit more streamlined. Stalker games being made in Ukraine by a Ukrainian company, I could see them very quickly needing money or not having time and just licensing Stalker to 3 or 4 different companies and having a whole trilogy come out in the next 6 or 7 years. Then we have a bookmarked article here, which is basically just an ad from Video Games Chronicles saying Outpost Infinity Siege mixes first-person shooting with base building for a monster co-op experience, which that's just an ad, so not talk about it. Alright, we'll get to the Gamatsu articles now. Jet to Free Shore, the Far Shore expansion, given time, launches January 31st alongside its Steam release. Akai Ito and Aoi Shiro HD Remaster for Switch launches May 25th in Japan. This looks like a couple of Yuri girl-on-girl romance visual novels. That would be what I would guess. Does seem like there's also a lot of drama CDs in the limited edition. Dokapon Kingdom Connect has a debut trailer and screenshots. This looks like this is a Mario Party type game. They just announced the screenshot of this on Wednesday, and it was pretty impossible to figure out what it was. Now I can basically tell it's a low polygon Mario Party clone. Colossal Cave is coming to PlayStation VR 2, which is interesting. Disgaea 7 has another trailer. Disgaea 7 at this point I think is out, so having yet another trailer is a little too much. An action platformer called Rooftop Renegade launches February 17th for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Sword Art Online Last Recollection story trailer is available. Yet another Sword Art Online game. Distinct difference here between these 3D models, which are a little lacking in visual detail, and then the flat cutscene intro key visual here. Ideally, we still have not gotten to the point where a flat animation style can be the way you actually play most games. They always cheap out and go with the 3D models because it would just be too expensive to make it actually look like the anime. I'm gonna have to skip looking at all of the games that came out today, or I'm gonna have to take a bathroom break. I'm not sure which I should do or which I want to do. I'll think about that for a few more minutes. Famitsu sales have been updated. One Piece Odyssey taking the second and third spot for PS4 and PS5. And then Dragon Ball Z Kakarot for the PS5 taking the 29th spot. That's basically the only thing that changed. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R DLC character has been announced, which is kind of crazy that they're still adding DLC characters for this game, because that game I think is 2 or 3 years old. But nice to see games supported when so many games don't get supported. A game called Endless Dungeon launches May 18th for basically everything except for Switch, which is going to be released later. Looks to me like it is an XCOM style turn-based game. They're calling it a roguelike RPG. Figment 2 Creed Valley has been delayed to March 9th, according to Gamatsu. Braves Rage launches February 2nd for the PS5, Switch, and PC. Looks like this is mostly just an RPG fighting game with no dungeon aspect to it. Calling it a deck builder, so I guess it plays by cards. Fashion Police Squad is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, and Xbox One and Switch on February 2nd. It's already available on PC. So let's see what the reviews are on it. Yep, very positive. It was on my following list. I guess it's always worth coming back and cleaning up the follow list a little bit more when a game gets ported to PC, or ported to consoles from PC, because that would be the second burst of a good reason to play a game like this now. Now this is basically just an arena shooter, I think, so its unique twist and themes aside, I'm not really sure this is the kind of game I would want to play. I'd give it a try, certainly. Not 100% sure I like the idea of somebody just swinging a belt around and whipping people. Even in the Indiana Jones games, you don't have him whipping enemies that often. Whipping is a pretty brutal way of hurting people, whereas bullets are quick and easy to blink and miss. A side-scrolling action-adventure game called Nocturnal has been announced for everything. Let's see. I think we may have already talked about this one. And the PGA Tour EA Sports launching March 24th for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. It's the exclusive home of the majors, not the Masters. I guess the majors and the Masters are different things in golf. Dokapon Kingdom Connect is coming to the West this spring. Also, we talked about the PlayStation VR 2 launch window lineup being announced. Again, not really a lineup that I'm particularly thrilled with, but yeah, there just, it really has never been a good list of video games, VR games. Res Infinite coming to the PS5 and PS2 on February 22nd. This gives me an excuse to play Res Infinite, but by the time I even get around to playing Res Infinite, it would air on my channel months and months later, which inherently that is something I would need to be better about. I saw something from TubeBuddy as a source of who maybe knows a little bit more about YouTube channels, and they said that the average channel that has over 1,000 subscribers has on average 150 videos. And then you look at my channel that has like 10,000 videos, it's like, oh yeah, I've totally failed as a YouTube content creator. I'm doing something very different, I know that, and I'm not just trying to like pay for subscribers or chase trends to get subscribers. I do want to be monetized, certainly, but yeah, if I was just trying to make a career out of it, I would have made 150 videos probably in the first year and then given up at that point completely. But I am in a unique position where there's not a lot of other things I could do with my time, and I do enjoy playing games even now, even though as a critic I'm often very critical of them and disappointed by them. And so I definitely look at it more as, well, I still have this massive backlog of games on Steam, and if I'm going to play them, I might as well make content on them. And there is some small chance that my channel would blow up one day, and then there would be a massive amount of backlog content people can check if they want to check it out, some of which will be fairly embarrassing. Let's see, Tetris Effect Connected is coming to the PS5, PS VR 2. This is too long of a title. I'm gonna have to just start calling it the VR 2. And we don't have any other screenshots here of Tetris Effect, but yeah, I really question whether the Tetris Effect works particularly well in VR. Age of Wonders 4 has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Which is this maybe like Heroes of Might and Magic? You know, with the whole Dungeons and Dragons aspect, I think the Heroes of Might and Magic series is not directly connected to Dungeons and Dragons, so it wouldn't make sense for them to like bring back that series and try and sell some new Might and Magic type games. I enjoyed Heroes of Might and Magic, but there were several other kinds of Might and Magic games that didn't succeed quite as well. On the other hand, I think there's a generational shift that could happen, and that would be a good thing, in that everybody moved to Pathfinder and we got away from phrases like Dungeons and Dragons, which is a toxic hot potato type phrase. People think of a bunch of lies and nonsense around Dungeons and Dragons that they've been told, even though that's basically grandmas and grandfathers at this point that would instantly say Dungeons and Dragons is evil and you shouldn't play it. And Might and Magic is the same way, is that people still, particularly like religious people, still would not allow some of their kids to play things with magic in the name. So if we got rid of Magic the Gathering as the title, Dungeons and Dragons, Heroes of Might and Magic, or just Might and Magic, get rid of all of those phrases, and new games came by, and they're much more simplistic names like Pathfinder, that'd be great. Even in this example, GTA Grand Theft Auto, if you made a new game called something different, like Saints Row has less drama tied around it than the GTA series. So I wouldn't really begrudge Rockstar if they said we're going to end the GTA series and instead call it something else, The City or Crime City, something along that lines. The stealing of cars, in particular in the GTA series, has long since not been a major focus. Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin DLC has a launch trailer, details, and screenshots if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. You have a very anime looking monster character. Guilty Gear Strive cross-platform open beta test has been set for February 3rd to 6th, and it includes the Xbox Series, the Xbox One, and Windows, free for everyone to try out if people are still playing Guilty Gear, which I imagine the hardcore fandom is. Ys Memories, The Oath of Felgahana, launches April 27th in Japan. Yet another Ys game. Maybe this is a new game, maybe this is a re-release of an old game. Doesn't really stand out as much when you actually see the screenshots versus the custom art. Prince Arthur for Switch launches, or Princess Arthur for Switch launches May 25th in Japan. This looks like this is a otome young maiden visual novel where you have a girl and several anime boys. You haven't seen a lot of those otome games, or otomate sometimes as it's pronounced. They like to shorten words in Japanese. I haven't seen a lot of those lately. A otome visual novel called Wand of Fortune R is coming to the Switch on May 18th in Japan. Noticeably, also, these are only really getting Japanese release dates. This time seems to be more magical centric. Probably from the same publisher. Disguise 7 has yet another trailer. Octopath Traveler 2 has a trailer, if you want to check that out. Clash of Artifacts of Chaos has been delayed to May 9th. Corwood Fight gameplay trailer. Now, as I understand copyright, I could potentially play trailers, but how would I turn a trailer into something different on my channel? You could try to cut it down to a minute, which would be very hard for a lot of trailers. You just have to kind of speed them up or do a butcher job of editing, or you just put them on your channel as trailers exclusively. And yeah, I don't know. Even though technically you can't copyright advertisements and trailers, that's not going to stop a lot of trailers from getting content ID'd on YouTube unfairly. So that's why you really haven't seen people do it before. So yeah, I would probably, if I was going to try to make more YouTube shorts, which I'm already making like 3 a day, that's probably way more than necessary. I definitely see people hate them, but I'm also getting more comments on YouTube shorts too, so, and more views, so it's kind of working, sadly. I could do like a first minute in on trailers and cut just that first minute of a trailer without speeding anything up and make a YouTube short around that. I don't know if there's a lot of added content or any value in that though. Just to say, here's the first minute of a trailer, then you have to go watch the rest of the trailer to see the rest of it. And breaking it into multiple parts would be crazy. If you have like a 10-minute trailer to have 10 YouTube shorts come out. There probably is something around that idea, but I'd have to think about it a lot more. Anyways, talking about news. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink and Grand Blue Fantasy Fest or Festival 2022 and 2023 has some demo screenshots. If you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Fort Solace launches this summer, published by Dear Villagers. New screenshots and artwork available. This is a dark looking game, so I have to assume that there's probably some scary elements to it. It seems like you might be on a space base somewhere. Yeah, they say it's a sci-fi horror game under the tags. And then Octopath Traveler details, Chete the Hunter, and several other people and elements. If you want to check that out. Okay. So, this is where I get to test out my new blurring feature. I will now press the shortcut key, and then I will come over to the web peak, and didn't trigger. Okay, why did it not trigger? It seems like it triggered somewhat. There we go. What's going on here? Why is it showing up and then not showing up? It like showed up for a second and then it didn't show up. I think what's happening here is maybe there's a pop-up on this. Well, that's not what's supposed to be happening, certainly. Let me just do it manually then. I don't know what went wrong there. Well, it says it's visible. So what is going on? Yeah, I've got some kind of programming here that's triggering wrong. And it's got to be as part of the advanced scene switcher. It's got to be. Alright, well, I'm just going to turn that off then. And we'll go back to the old way of doing it. And then I'll have to experiment more. Like, I just made this censored blurring, and so no surprise it doesn't work. Nothing ever works on the first time. That is something I would definitely encourage anybody who ever wants to have kids or work with anybody at all, is that don't be surprised when things don't work on the first time, particularly in computers and IT, because nothing ever works the first time. And particularly if you're working in production only because you don't have a second setup and second computer to work in a development environment, things are going to go wrong. Things always go wrong. So don't make a big deal about it. Be understanding. Now, how understanding can I be around a Chinese game that is, I guess, a foot fetish game? It's not particularly the best foot fetish game I've ever seen. There's been a few of them. This really comes straight out of China, and that pornography is not allowed in China, so let's instead make a foot fetish game that doesn't really show anything. Noticeably, you probably want to get a more adult game that would highlight some other elements if you're going to focus on feet. Like, for instance, the fact that her legs are literally clipping into each other so you can't see up her skirt. Whereas if you're going to make an adult game, her legs should totally be open. You should be able to see up her skirt too. You should probably have a lot more cleavage and a lot more lewd revealing clothing in general, just for people who like feet and like other things. Or at the very least, a little bit more lewd variety in clothing too. Yeah, this is not working well, and they're abusing the tags. Again, saying there's nudity and sexual content in here, when arguably I would say maybe you could say there's lewd content. I doubt you could say it's sexual content, no. Team Punk looks like nothing. Trenches survival game looks interesting, and it's already on my follow list somehow. Brum the Toy Maker looks interesting, so I'll give that a follow in a YouTube short. Magic Kingdom War. Today is Wednesday, so it will probably run into a decent amount of adult games. And just like every day, we're going to run into a lot of garbage games. And most of these don't even deserve a statement around them. If I talked about the accountability section, this one might be something. Now, while I'm looking at games, instead of trying to find something to say about each game, there might be an argument around doing it that way. Yeah, because there is often very little to say, and it's very repetitive. Here we have what looks like it might be an Indian game, English and Arabic. It doesn't look like anything, but that is an interesting combination of languages. This character doesn't inherently strike me as being Arabic or Middle Eastern, Asian. Let's see. No, the world doesn't really stand out as being Arabic, but you can be surprised. Certainly, sometimes certain countries, they are Middle Eastern, and yet they look just like the United States. Plus, since you're asset flipping most of the models for that game, everything is going to look very generic. Hike Valley, I don't think there's quite enough game here. It's nice pretty colors on trees, but just a walking simulator around trees I think is not enough. Robo Maestro, you have a nice unique robot, but then you have a very ugly interface. Phrase Ninja looks like garbage. T-Rex dinosaur game. Oh, it is just a Google dinosaur game if you made it 3D. That's a cool idea. Certainly. Infinite Runner. Mythlink. Doesn't look like anything. Stuart the Fox. Looks interesting enough. You know, I'm not really checking prices here. I'm not really checking to see if it's a player versus player game. Probably should just check all of that later. Spacelight Factory Prologue. I'll make a YouTube short around that. But yeah, it may very well get down to the point where I just need to be more careful when I'm looking at games during the fall list and less careful when I'm looking at games that just came out. I'm a little surprised I haven't seen an adult game so far. Are we going to have a rare instance in which all adult games are not released on a Wednesday? I started fairly late. My insomnia is still causing me to wake up at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, which that was part of the problem, is I actually had an appointment date I needed to meet at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I was literally afraid I was just going to oversleep it, but I got lucky and actually set an alarm clock, which is something I don't really do. I'll give this a chance, the Cenozoic era. Let's see. Having the need to go to the bathroom makes it quicker to make decisions and decide whether or not you're going to put it on the follow list or give it a YouTube short. We actually have seen a decent amount of games here. Bee Birthday visual novel. Well, this is weird looking, and I do like weird, particularly for the YouTube shorts. Whereas this looks just like a Minecraft game, which I'll give this a chance, but I'm not going to make a short around it. I think people would definitely have a lot to say about that, probably in the negative. One of the things I have noticed about YouTube Shorts, as I'm starting to get some comments there, is a lot of it is just like, oh, it's like this game and this game comparisons, which, in fairness, any comment is good, so I'm not going to discourage any comments of any kind. But I don't know specifically what kind of comments I would like or would appreciate on the comments in general. Like, ideally you're always looking for deep, thoughtful conversations, but doing a short for a minute showing off a brand new game that nobody's played and nobody knows anything about it really is not in any way a solid foundation for deep, thoughtful conversations. So since the content itself is admittedly shallow comments are basically all I will get. Best case scenario, somebody sees a game that reminds them of something they really loved, and then they go into a few sentences about how they really love that game, or people make suggestions about games that they really loved that are older, which that would be helpful, certainly, because obviously I'm not going to make YouTube shorts about old games. One of the comments talked about Lego Universe, and I don't know why you would specifically shout out Lego Universe, because I don't think anybody liked Lego Universe as a game. I'll give this a short. I don't know if this ball meme is really anything. These frustration platformer games, though, I think we'll say no to. Alright, now we have our first adult game, and immediately it jumps to just full on nudity. In the first screenshot, there's not even a video that would take a second to load. It's called webcam sex. It is, every screenshot is a flat 2D anime girl with different hair colors, mostly naked, taking pictures in front of webcams on beds and things like that. They seem to all be alone. It's $1.19. It's English only. I don't know if there's really a game here so much though. Is they say it's the simplest 2D puzzle. Um, they don't have a single screenshot of any of the puzzle, but I'd assume it's just a 2D slide puzzle type thing. The images are good enough, I would say. It is going for more of a slightly Western art style. I'd say maybe even European, Russian. I wish I could show it. Now, of course, if I had the blur on and then I tried to show it, I wouldn't be able to show it anyway. So there's that problem still. And with the way I'm doing it, I don't know if there's a way I could easily blur just part of the screen instead of all the screen. And ideally you would want to be able to blur just part of the screen. The next game on Steam is called Slave, just Slave. It is a 3D model with a more realistic brown haired girl. She's in some level of bondage in one screenshot or two, but a lot of it she's just in a French made outfit. It's a visual novel, certainly for $5.09, English and Chinese being the languages supported. It is definitely just one of these asset flip CGI adult games. And interestingly, those were the last two games to even come out on Steam, which, if anything, I think that means those were the first two games to come out on Steam, because I think it actually goes backwards. So maybe there is a bit of a delay in bundling happening there. In that they are putting all the adult games only out in the late afternoon. Wait a minute, is today Wednesday or today Friday? Oh, today is Friday. I was thinking today was Wednesday. Yeah, I don't even know what day it is. Yeah, today's Friday, and that there literally only be two adult games. That is shocking. That screams of some weird censorship going on. I have to assume that by the time we stream on Monday, we're gonna have a bunch more, at least 4 or 5 more adult games, and maybe I'll have the blur working by then. Like, I also should definitely play more Yu-Gi-Oh over the weekend. We'll see if that happens. And that is it for games. So we're at GameDeveloper.com already, which means, yeah, we'll finish here in just a few minutes. Riot Games laying off nearly 50 staff as part of a strategic shift. I thought it was 28 people last time, or around 20. But apparently, Riot. Maybe I'm thinking of a different company. Yeah, I must be thinking of a different company completely. But yeah, once Microsoft said they were laying off 11,000 people, that was the perfect time for every other person to say we're laying off 100 people, 50 people, 10 people. Easy to look like less of the bad guy when you have somebody laying off 11,000 people. And that potentially makes another argument for Microsoft being very corporate protectionist, in that they would potentially hurt themselves to just protect the idea of corporations and big business in general. I can't help but wonder if that isn't exactly why they're trying to, the real reason why they're trying to acquire Activision Blizzard is to protect the job of the CEO of Activision Blizzard and protect rich people that they're friends with, or just protect the general idea of companies being awful and still succeeding and still managing to be a successful company. Possibly Microsoft is actually a shareholder in Activision Blizzard. I imagine they already are, and they definitely will be if they acquire the company. Like, ideally, in a fair world, for all the awful things that have happened amongst all the managers, or a lot of the managers, not all, but a lot of the managers in Activision Blizzard, you would have a government agency come in and say, these managers must be eliminated from the company. They must be retired, fired. They are toxic people. They do not deserve to be in a position of power. But there is no mechanism in the United States to do that. The closest we have is something like a French Revolution guillotine of the aristocracy type thought. But yeah, that's not within a legal framework, certainly. But yeah, you in the United States are 100% rewarded for being a jerk and never punished for being a jerk. And that's something that people would like to address. There is also a small effort that will almost certainly fail to make a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United in the United States, which allows a ridiculous amount of poorly documented money to flow into the hands of politicians, basically bribes, or corporations being able to give massive amounts of money without documenting it. That was a Supreme Court decision that happened before the current Supreme Court that many people don't feel like is correct. Was a correct decision at that time. But that certainly could affect people like the ESA in game related news, where the ESA is a lobbying group, and with Citizens United in place, the ESA obviously has an easier time in bribing and lobbying politicians, but so does every other lobbying group for every other cause, and that's kind of the problem. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says Monster Hunter World Iceborne roars past 10 million copies sold, which we were comparing the about 5 million, I think it was, for Monster Hunter Sunshine or Sunrise, and then the 4.7 million views for The Last of Us Episode 1. Well, Iceborne totally blows that 4.7 million views for the first episode of Last of Us. And yeah, Last of Us Episode 1, people really could only say so much, so I'm not hearing people really talk about it now. I imagine in the next couple of weeks more people might have reviews around it and talk about it a little bit more, but I imagine Last of Us overall will be talked about fairly frequently, but not in major numbers. Last of Us British Australia wants more game industry unions. The unions of us is the joke subtitle headline here, which should you have jokes headlines, sub bylines there? Oh well, no, that's a byline. This is a subtitle. Probably not. We had already talked about this story. Let's see. Apparently, Game Developer and GDC are sibling companies with Informatech, which they use Informatech surveys quite a bit and talk about them. There's perhaps maybe some better news reporting could be done if GameDeveloper.com was its own independent website instead of being connected to GDC conferences and Game Developer Conference and Informa, and just having one big parent company that creates some odd connections. Can M&A be a positive force in the game industries? Devs aren't convinced. Devs weigh in on the potential of merger and acquisitions activity. I assume that's what M&A means, mergers and acquisitions. Maybe you shouldn't use in the headline M&A twice. You had plenty of room to put mergers and acquisition activity. The thing about game companies in particular is that very rarely, maybe you have Atari and Intellivision as examples of what happens when a company just goes completely bankrupt and somebody who has no interest in the game industry acquires them. But the vast majority of game companies that go bankrupt either go from being THQ to being THQ Nordic to Embracer Group, where it's just they've done some legal wrangling to buy out the licenses of games that once existed under a different company name. Very few games just are not available for sale these days. So for gamers, we really haven't seen a lot of situations where games are just not available for purchase. Ironically, the one company that's been around basically from the beginning, Nintendo, is the worst company as far as you can't play their old games. Not Atari, not Intellivision, not Sega, or anybody else. So you have this situation where mergers and acquisitions in any industry might create better, smoother processes in which things are done, and particularly in game development, that might be you have better programmers who know how to use better code and better software, and you get potentially better games written better. If Warner Brothers, for instance, with their Arkham series of games had been programmed, if all those games had been acquired by, say, Gearbox, just to pick a company, and then Gearbox was making Batman games, the Batman games would probably run smoother and look better and play better. So in that case, for gamers, mergers and acquisitions probably are a positive force for the end user, for the gamer out there. Is it great for employees? No. Like, I definitely just earlier today have said companies should always be forced to be small, and there shouldn't be mergers as an option or acquisitions as an option. If it depends on your goal. Do you want an efficient workforce that has the fewest number of employees that are redundant or unnecessary? Then so you make better games, then yes, you are good for mergers and acquisitions. If you want an overall society where economically everybody is employed, then you would be no against mergers and acquisitions, and you would be only small business all the time. That would be what you pushed. Although at a certain level, if everything's just going to be automated anyways, maybe it doesn't matter if there's just a giant Microsoft company that owns all the games, because all the games are being programmed by artificial intelligence anyways, and there's only one employee that flips on the light switch to make a game, and that's it. They just go and press the big red button, and it spits, and the artificial intelligence spits out a game, and then everybody else is given universal basic income, and they can just live their lives playing games instead of making games. Inherently, I would like all game developers to wish secretly in their heart that they could spend their entire life playing video games instead of making video games. Sadly, I don't think a lot of game developers really do want to play games in the first place, and that's why a lot of game developers are just so differently opinionated than actual gamers. It's because they're looking at life from a very different perspective. At the moment, though, it probably is better for employees and society as a whole to try and block mergers and acquisitions, but the United States in particular has no taste for that. Europe has a little bit of taste for that, but not that much. Particularly European companies are going to be allowed to merge and acquire in Europe, whereas foreign companies are going to get more scrutiny. What's funny here is Google has managed, according to GameDeveloper.com, to one-up Microsoft by laying off 12,000 employees instead of 11,000 in a week of mass layoffs. There's more than likely 12,000 employees at YouTube alone that are doing nothing and should be eliminated. I don't know if this is the 12,000 right employees that should be eliminated, but there have just been mass layoffs across the tech industry in general. Let's see, no real breakdown here as far as who's been laid off. Yep, I doubt YouTube will suffer in any way as far as having layoffs, because YouTube's not really doing anything anyways. They're slowly trying to add new features. One thing they did announce that they're testing is giving actual timestamps when you violate a guideline standard, which is something people have been demanding, rightfully so, for years, that you would get this community guideline strike saying you did violence, and then you would have no idea where in the video the violence happened that they think is unacceptable, or you would cuss multiple times and then the one cuss word they take offense to. Plus, by forcing the, let's face it, it's probably Indian workers for Google, subcontractors for Google, to put a timeline stamp on videos where the community guidelines have been violated, you're making those employees be a little bit more honest, because they definitely flag some videos or approve videos for being flagged when they don't watch the videos and they don't care, and they just automate it. They basically automate it while having somebody click the approve button without actually looking at the videos. That being said, there have been timeline stamps for other violations in the past, and there have been multiple cases in which they just say it's throughout the entirety of the video from the first second to the last second, or they pick a random time and they just put it there. And unless there is a second tier of people who are double checking what those first low level employees are putting in, whatever garbage they're putting in as the timestamp, it doesn't really fix anything. Inherently, we need a commitment from YouTube to actually care about false flags in the game, in their community guideline strikes, which they don't care about. And generally, making YouTube employees care about anything would be a good thing. They need to care about small content creators and new and upcoming creators more. They need to care about maintaining and fairly applying the rules and not changing the rules. They need to care about not creating controversies and backlash, and they need to care about adding new features and not just copying TikTok because TikTok happens to be popular at the moment. Let's see. This is a different way for videogamedeveloper.com to phrase this. 34 Industries, there's a report that says 343 Industries has been taken off Halo development and will oversee the series. A larger Halo franchise may receive another shakeup in the aftermath of layoffs and changing plans. So I guess this is a different story now, because they're saying the entire company of 343 Industries has been taken off control. Taken off the Halo development. It's important to point out, though, that whatever 343 Industries is now is not what it was then when Halo was originally made. Most of the people who worked on Halo, the original Halo Combat Evolved, I think was the name of it, Halo 1, they all went over and formed the other company that made Destiny and is focusing on Destiny. So it was really just the people who stayed around and proved to not really be capable of maintaining the quality of what 343 used to be that is left. So it almost certainly would have been a smart move to not have them in charge solely of development of the game to begin with. They want to put the 343 Industries name on it, but they probably need 4 or 5 third-party developers to also be working on the game in parallel, doing all the heavy lifting. Let's see. Nintendo returns to Switch production as component shortage wanes, which I wouldn't be surprised if it actually is the case that they are saying they're producing Switches when actually they're trying to scale up development of a Switch 2. If you could make it look like you were making a whole bunch of Switches and yet it actually is just a software upgrade to being a Switch 2 or a hardware replacement, like in a lot of ways, if you just put a bigger CPU GPU on the same circuit board and that was the only pieces you had to swap instead of building something new from scratch, I could see them doing that. Like that would be an easy change on the production line. So yeah, that is a possibility too. Or some factories, I imagine you can order, say, let's say Nintendo was going to order 10 million new Switches. You could probably order that much, and then as the first 6 months pass, you could say, actually, let's cut that order of 10 million. You've already made 1 million, and let's convert that order into a Switch 2 and make 9 million Switch 2s instead. I imagine a factory wouldn't be too upset about that as long as they're still getting the work. But that is mostly purely speculation. There's a report that development on Marvel Avengers is ending at Crystal Dynamics. Not super surprising. The Marvel Avengers game was definitely not well received. Noticeably though, this game came out maybe a year before Marvel Snap, maybe 2 at most, and I wouldn't be surprised if this starts a year or 2 of a timer until Marvel Snap development stops at Second Dinner or just stops overall. Marvel Snap as a game is desperate to monetize, and even Angry Joe is telling his fans, even though he talked about Marvel Snap and loved it, he's telling his fans directly not to spend money on it. And so you have a maybe somewhat committed fan base for Marvel Snap, but nobody in it is willing to pay any money. So financially, it's almost certainly going to be a disaster unless there are just enough whales that are actually buying all the Marvel Snap microtransactions. So I think it probably will be claimed that Marvel Snap is a financial disaster, and then they'll shut it down in 2 or 3 years just because of that. And Second Dinner is seemingly already moving on to the development of their next game, and so they don't really need to be the support company for that game anyways. Alright, well, we have an adult game called Bonerdale on the fall list here that is 50%, so it needs more time. We're going through the fall list cleanup here. Bone Lab is a VR game, but I'll leave it on the fall list. Bone Lover. Is this a VR game? Early access from September 11th, which is a weird day to put your game out. Probably could say no to this, but I don't want to make a decision. Let's see. Bomb-a-Gun seems to be a card game. It's very positive, free to play, single player online PvP. I'll put that on the wish list. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk is coming soon. This is the spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. We haven't heard anything about this game since it was announced, probably 4 or 5 months ago. Wouldn't be surprised if this is struggling in its development, although the developer and publisher doesn't really have anything else, I imagine, in development, so they probably won't be very quick to cancel it. It'd be easier just to say it's still coming when people ask. Here we have a non-English visual novel that I think this is Bokahime Project, where it's a guy that is forced to dress as a girl to go to an old girl's school. Yeah, the little male gender symbol there. This is Bokahime Project. Yeah. Japanese only. I guess I was putting this on the fall list just to see if it was ever going to come to get an English translation. And at this point, I guess the answer is no. And noticeably, it's not particularly relevant because I imagine most of the people that bought this did not buy it on Steam. And maybe there's some censorship on the Steam version. But yeah, not really a justification to leave that on the fall list. I would like to see a cross-dressing game or narrative or story at least once. Although even in that case, I was like forced cross-dressing. Anyway, so yeah, for kind of a generic reason. Right, this one says it's coming soon too. I have too many coming soons, but I'm gonna leave this on the fall list just because of the crazy visuals. Yep. And then you have like here you need to hide your identity, so you're cross-dressing versus cross-dressing to be like a drag queen for sexual reasons, or versus sissification where you're being forced to wear female clothing as a male to turn you into a sissy and humiliate you and do that kind of fetish, which those are all different reasons around cross-dressing. I guess I'll give this more time since I can't make a decision. Body Electric, give it more time. A lot of these I'm just giving more time. Bocce Time, this is a VR game, right? So I'll probably get rid of that. Bobak, this is 100% positive. Interesting. So we can put that on the wish list. And then that would be all the fall list that we had. Let me just really quickly go through my following list, which, yeah, I had to redo my ad blocking so that I leave the For You following here, because every time you come to this page it goes back to For You. It creates a weird situation where when you scroll up it comes back, so if you wanted to show the screen you'd have to go up, then go down, then go up, then go down, just to hide that aspect. But I can't really just permanently hide it because obviously I'm gonna have to just click it every single time. And yeah, if I really have only gotten like 22 tweets in the last 2 hours and 45 minutes, that feels like a little less. Does kind of feel like the Twitter posts are getting fewer and fewer, and people are just using it less and less. Crystal Dynamics confirmed the development of Marvel Avengers has been coming to an end, so we get a quick confirmation on that rumor. Let's see. And very possibly there's nothing else. Yeah, very possibly there's nothing else really worth talking about on this Friday. Perhaps we had less news this Friday because it was a Friday and less game announcements. It still doesn't really explain only 2 adult games coming out on Friday. That does seem oddly few. Yep. Well, I am scrolling down a lot further, potentially because I'm seeing tweets that I didn't see before. I'm not 100% sure that when you click the following tab, you are actually seeing everything you're following, or if you're not seeing possibly a subsection of everything you're following. You probably are seeing everything. The ESA highlighted this new Project Leonardo PlayStation 5 accessibility controller, which obviously as a lobbying group they're going to try and make the industry look good, so no surprise that they would put out an article. Plus the ESA struggles to put out any new news at all, so then anytime they have an opportunity to put out good news, they should. Yeah, there's nothing here. And this is just another case in which the live video here is slower even in fast forward mode than what I can do just scrolling down 22 tweets. The Duel Live. Alright, well, I can't help but feel like I'm off with the Duel Lives anyways. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.